Okay, good morning, everyone. I hope you can view my whiteboard and you can hear me properly.
Yes, sir.
Excellent. So, yesterday we have essentially derived three moduluses, talked about Young's modulus, Y, and just to be consistent with Lowry's book, we can use expression E as well. Same thing happened. So when something went wrong, what is it? Or E. And we said Young's modulus actually correlates. What does it correlate? Can you tell me? What does Young's modulus correlate? Normal stress with
Normal stream.
longitudinal strain. Normal stress with longitudinal strain, right? Similarly, we talked about bulk modulus, and bulk modulus correlates pressure with volumetric strain. Okay? Volumetric strain. And then we talked about shear modulus. Shear modulus correlates shear stress with shear strain, right? Now, these three moduli are mutually related, where bulk modulus can be expressed as Young's modulus by into 1 minus 2 eta, where eta is essentially your uh, Poisson's ratio. Okay, I hope you all know what Poisson's ratio is, so I'm not repeating. You all know what Poisson's ratio is, right? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Just to be clear once more, suppose I have a uh, material, okay, which has suppose uh, breadth of B and length of L, okay, and this after application of some stress, it gets strained, and what we see essentially that you know it kind of thins out, okay, but it extends. Okay, so if I kind of compress it from this side, it will be thinned out and it will be extend. So suppose this is B1 and this is L1. So delta B is equals to your B minus B1, and delta L is equals to uh, L1 minus L, right? Now, obviously, what essentially is seen that delta B and delta L are not equal, right? So the Poisson's ratio is defined by the ratio of delta B by delta L. Okay, this is how Poisson's ratio is defined. So
So it would be delta B by delta L.
yeah, that's what I
Poisson's
said.
ratio.
Delta V by delta L. What did I write?
Delta L by delta
Oh,
V.
no, no, it is delta B by delta L, of course.
Okay,
Sorry,
okay,
I
okay.
said delta B by delta L. Maybe I have written a delta B by delta L. Okay, so that is my Poisson's ratio. Now, uh, so bulk modulus is related to Young's modulus with this formula. Similarly, shear modulus is also related to Young's modulus with here also this is Young Poisson's ratio. Okay. Now, with this knowledge, let us look at the seismic waves. Okay. So suppose at a single point in 3 dimension, I have created that elastic collision or the disturbance. Okay. So as a result, what would happen? The seismic wave, the elastic wave will propagate. And as any other wave propagation, what we can do, we can express the propagation of elastic wave as, in terms of wave front. Okay. So think about it like uh, if as a sphere. So what does wave front means? Wave front means that at each of this point, okay, along this imaginary surface, at each of this point along this imaginary surface, you either have compression. So the way, we have, the way we have drawn about, we talked about elastic wave propagation, that you know in cases mm, what are the particles do come close to each other, and we call them as C, and then you have relaxation, and then you have another compression, and then relaxation. And in second, I mean, this is, if this is time period 1, in time period 2, of course this compression will be relaxation, and then the compression kind of will move here. Okay, then relaxation, again compression, as if these compressions are kind of moving through to the direction of wave propagation. Okay. So such C's and R's are called phases. Okay. Phases of the wave. So in a typical wave front, what is assumed, that all the phases of the particles are exactly the same. So suppose this is C, maybe that will be R, then maybe another one which will be C. Okay. So it's in 3 dimension, and this is how we describe it. So it will be in all directions, right? Now, working with wavefront can often be challenging. Okay. So that's why what we generally do, we actually, instead of thinking them in terms of wavefront, okay, we actually think about ray paths. Okay, these are called ray paths, and so this is the direction of the propagation of the wave. Okay, ray path signifies the direction of the propagation of the wave, and uh, at a particular place, this wave front must be perpendicular to the ray path. So now if I look at this place, what I will find, that the ray path, so if this wave front, it's like a 3 dimensional surface, right? Because we are looking at a sphere. So this ray path will be, if this is my wave front, the ray path will be a line which is perpendicular uh, to the uh, to the wave front. Okay. Now broadly, okay, seismic waves are subdivided into two categories. Okay, one we call body wave, and the other one we call as surface wave. So body wave means, suppose this is a piece of the crust of the earth. Okay, and suppose I have a disturbance created at this point, which is nothing but this, and then I have the propagation of elastic waves from here, and you can see that You have to imagine them as spheres, okay, as spheroidal wave fronts, okay. So you can see this type of wave, which is kind of propagating through the body of the medium, through in 3 dimensions, through the body of the medium. That is what we call as body wave, okay. We also see that waves do propagate only through a very thin part of the surface, okay. So such waves are only restricted in the very thin part on the surface of the crust, okay. And such waves are called surface waves. Okay. Now body waves are broadly subdivided into two categories. One is called P wave, the other one is called S wave. Now P wave has several names like compressional waves, or also called primary wave, okay. Similarly, S wave is called shear wave. Also, this is called secondary wave. Now, what happens in case of P wave? You know this, I'm just repeating, that the individual particles actually oscillate, because oscillation will actually the elastic collision, or the elastic deformation that we are talking about will be a the elastic collision that we are talking about will be a function of uh, sorry, the wave propagation will actually result in the um, oscillation of these particles, right? Now, if this oscillation happens in a direction parallel to the wave propagation, is happening today. This, sorry, my whiteboard completely went off. I don't know what reason. Just give me one moment, huh? Okay. So if the direction of wave propagation is parallel to the direction of oscillation of these individual particles, we call it a P wave or primary wave. Okay, and how this essentially propagates by creating a series of compressions and relaxations. Okay, and then of course this will be this area will be converted to relax. Sorry. Okay, this is time one, time frame one, this is time frame two, and so on and so forth. This is how the P wave will propagate. Okay, and in case of S wave, we know that the individual particles oscillation will be, perpendicular to the direction of wave propagation. Okay. If this is the direction of wave propagation, then individual particle will oscillate perpendicular to the direction of it. Okay. So what I will observe, that I will observe some of the particles, okay, is oscillating, uh, like this. So like this, the oscillation will kind of dump down, and in the second place, the oscillation will be in the opposite side, And such way, this is the way the wave will propagate. And this is what we call as shear wave or secondary wave. So you can see here essentially that the motion of the particle is perpendicular to the direction of the wave propagation. Okay, is that fine, guys?
Yes.
All right. We will see that surface waves are broadly sub categorized with categorized as Rayleigh wave and love wave. Okay, but we will read about them later on in this chapter itself, but later on when we talk about earthquake seismology. Because they are, I mean, exclusively related to earthquakes, and you will find out that the surface waves are actually way more dangerous than the body waves. Especially this love wave is most destructive, the most destructive type of wave that completely hampers human civilization. It has the capability at the love waves. Okay, we will see them. Although the name is kind of very ironic. Yeah, it has nothing lovable about it, but yeah, still they are called love waves. All right, but we will talk about surface waves later on. Now let us just try to find out the basic wave equations for P wave and S wave. Okay. So before doing that, let me just draw a picture whose hints I have already, I'm actually was giving you, but let me uh, let me first draw the picture, okay, and then I will explain. Let me draw three small pictures for you. All right. So now, as you know, what I'm trying to draw here is, of course, this is the wave front. So, I have from this large sphere that we have seen, I'm just taking out a small piece of it and representing it here. Okay. This is the wave front. Okay. And this is the representation of a generalized vibration as components parallel to three orthogonal reference axes. Okay. So the particle motion in the x direction is back and forth parallel to the direction of propagation corresponding to the p wave. Okay. So here the particles are kind of propagating as p waves. Okay. So the particles will kind of, do this oscillation of compression and oscillations. Now, vibration along y and z axis are in the plane of the wavefront and normal to the direction of propagation. Z vibration in the vertical plane corresponds to the SV wave, as we call them. Okay, and in the y direction, the particles are also parallel to the wavefront. They are called S capital H waves. Okay, now, so what do I mean by that? That the particles are essentially, are vibrating in all directions. So I can resolve them in three components, the vibration of the particles. One of them is parallel to the y. We are calling them as SH waves. And the other one is parallel to the z-axis, that is SV waves. But remember that SY and SH, they are both lying on the plane of the wavefront. Okay, but the x-axis, that is kind of coming out from the wavefront. Okay, and this is the direction of the propagation of my p wave. Okay, now if I look at this this particle motion, which I have already drawn, that I will see that that particles will do this and then do that, and again they will come closer. Here they will move apart, again they will come closer. Okay, so as if here the particles are coming closer, here they are moving apart, here again they are coming closer, here they are moving apart, here they are coming closer. Okay, so we will call these as compressions, relaxations, compression, relaxation, compression. Okay, now let us just only try to focus on this p wave, focus on this the propagation of the wave. Let us just only configure things in the in one dimension, then if we will translate it into 3 dimension. Okay, so now let us forget about all the other components and let us only stick to my x-axis. Okay, so this is the direction of the wave propagation. They are the same, right? They are the same. I mean, don't be confused that this is just my bad drawing. Now let us say that I have a very small piece of the wavefront which has an area of ax. Okay, and this is the x-axis, and the force that is applied on these particles for the wave propagation is like Fx. Okay, now if I again kind of zoom into this system, what I will observe, so this is the x-axis again. Okay, let us consider two particles. One particle is situated at a distance of x from my origin, from my reference frame, and there is another particle which is situated at a distance of x plus dx. Okay, now let us say that this particle, after this at a particular instance when this propagation is happening, this x has a displacement of u. Displacement means is simply moving here, or you can say, this is equal to your longitudinal strain. Okay, I mean, it's not exactly longitudinal strain, but it's something like the delta L. Okay, and then x plus dx uh, has a displacement of u plus du. Okay, now so the net force acting on this element that we have just defined will be Fx dFx, okay, minus Fx. Okay, and that is nothing but dFx. Okay, or we can write down dFx as delta Fx by delta x dx. Okay, now Fx is caused by the stress element sigma xx. Now let us say the stress acting on this element is sigma xx. Okay, and that is acting on the area ax, right? That is acting on this area ax. So we can write down, okay, Fx is equals to sigma xx multiplied by x, simply because we know force per unit area is actually my stress, right? Now, what sort of stress sigma xx is? This is, as we know, is normal stress, right? So, with that, what we can write down, that you see, we also know that P is equals to mf, right? M is the mass of the material and f is the acceleration. So the element that we have just drawn, okay, we can write down the mass of that element being rho dx x, and f is delta square u by delta t square, being u being the displacement, right? And on the right hand side, what we can write down, the one that we have just derived, dx ax delta sigma xx by dx. Okay. What I have done, I have simply replaced, fx with sigma xx and ax. Okay. And I have taken ax out of the derivative. Now, we also know from Hooke's law that sigma xx is equals to E epsilon xx, okay, where sigma xx is my stress and epsilon xx is my strain, right? And E is my Young's modulus, okay. So I can write down further E, now du by dx, delta u by delta x, not du, delta u by delta x is again my strain epsilon. Okay, now I can essentially replace sigma xx with this, okay, and I will come up with a equation that delta square u by delta t square is equals to v square. I will say what v is, delta square u delta x square, where v is equals to root over e by rho. Okay. Now you can see by doing this, what I have got, and v is essentially the velocity of the p wave, okay, along x direction. Okay, v is the velocity of the p wave along x direction. Now, what I have then derived, I have derived the velocity equation for p wave propagation along x direction. Okay, the velocity equation for p wave along x direction. Okay. Now, of course, if you remember the first picture that I have drawn, it's we cannot simply consider the propagation along x-axis. So we have to think of the all the axis. I mean, we have to think it in 3 dimension. So, in 1 dimension, it was delta square u delta t square is equals to v square delta square u delta x square. We can simply translate that to a form delta square theta in, so this is 1 dimension and this is in 3 dimension. The next one that I am writing down, delta t square is equals to alpha square delta square theta delta x square. Okay. Now I have got 2 extra terms here. One is theta, and theta is called dilation. So there is a fancy expression for dilation, but to physically understand what dilation is u is the displacement in one direction, right? And dilation is the displacement in 3 dimension. So as if the sphere that we have drawn, so displacement in 1 dimension is individual particle moving in one direction. So, but if you translate that movement in 3 dimension, as if this whole sphere is kind of like enlarging and getting squeezed. So that motion, that uh, shrinking and swelling, if you like, physically, of that wavefront sphere that we have drawn, okay, will be termed as dilation. Okay? So this is dilation, and alpha will then be is the velocity of the wave in 3 dimension, velocity of the p wave in 3 dimension, and that can be written as Young's modulus plus 2 shear modulus by rho, or this can be further simplified as bulk modulus plus 4/3 shear modulus by rho. Okay, bulk modulus plus 4/3 shear modulus by rho. Now, if I just, or if I'm only left with this equation, so this is the velocity equation for p wave propagation in 3 dimension. This is the general equation. Okay. Now I'm interested in this particular equation where alpha, if I just remove rest of it, so alpha is equals to over k plus 4/3 mu by rho, where k is bulk modulus, mu is the shear modulus. Okay. Now we know for a solid, okay, it has both. So it has a positive k and it also has a positive mu. Okay. For a fluid or a liquid, it has a positive k, but mu is 0. So if I try to find out what would be the velocity of a p wave in a liquid, what I'll be left with. So mu becomes 0 over k by rho. Okay, and you can see alpha is non-zero. So what does that mean? That p wave does propagate through liquid. Okay, p wave does propagate through liquid. Is it clear, guys? Did you understand the wave propagation of p wave?
Yes, sir. Sir, I
Uh,
have a doubt.
yes, please.
Yeah, in the you said that theta is a that means three-dimensional displacement.
Yeah, I mean, to physically understand it, this is how you should understand. Okay, yeah, this is called dilation. The measurement of dilation.
So it a vector quantity means having
Yeah,
units meters.
yeah, it is a vector. Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Okay, because displacement is a vector. Displacement does have a direction, right? Now, similarly, okay, I'm not doing the derivation for you, but you can find the derivation in case of shear wave. This is given in the approach is exactly the same. Okay, the approach is exactly the same. You will find the derivation in Laudy's book, and this is of course part of your course. Yeah, you will find the derivation written very nicely in Laudy's book. But you will find out that for shear wave, by the way, shear wave is also called transverse wave. Okay, this is another name, transverse wave. the shear wave equation becomes delta square omega delta t square is equals to beta square delta square omega delta x square. Okay. Now, omega is, of course, the displacement along the direction perpendicular to the wave propagation in this particular case. Okay. And beta is the velocity of the shear wave, and beta is equals to then written as mu by rho. Okay. Now you see this doesn't have a bulk modulus term. Okay. So if mu is 0 in fluid, we find out that beta is also 0. So hence we say that the shear wave do not propagate through fluid. All right. So this is all I wanted to talk about the velocities for S wave and P wave propagation. I think this is enough for, that is what you will need to get into the actual business of seismology. There are, of course, many other general equations on wave propagations are given in Laurey's book, but they will not be that relevant for you to go ahead with this course. Okay. So with that, let me just start with the earthquake seismology. Okay. So with this basic background knowledge, let us start on earthquake seismology. Then I have to find out where it is. I think this one. All right, let's begin. Can you see my slides, guys? Hello?
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay. So, you know, earthquake is something which is terrifying human civilization, not just now, has been there since, I don't know, since prehistoric times. And as it has been there, it's like all on a sudden, the human being felt this tremor, the earth being kind of shaken. And, you know, there have been myths around it. So how many of you, let me ask, how many of you ever felt an earthquake? Who has felt an earthquake ever in their life? I mean, a considerable one, not the one which, you know, your parents told you, yeah, see, there was an earthquake. The ones that you have felt. How many of you have felt? Can someone volunteer and share your story? How was it? No one? All right. So, you know, I wish that you never feel an earthquake, and at least the one which is devastating, because if it is really devastating, you will have hardly anything to do about it. You know. So this is one of the disasters which is, I mean, which doesn't give us any time to respond. Almost, you know, it happens instantaneously, it goes away instantaneously, but then it leaves behind a deep scar on our society. Okay, at least the places where such earthquakes have happened. Can you tell me some of the very famous earthquakes that happen in and around India? Anyone? You must have read in the newspaper. What are some of the most devastating earthquakes that happened? Come on, you have to tell me. You heard about Nepal earthquakes or not? Bhuj earthquake? Why you are so silent? Ishita, have you heard of any notorious earthquakes of India? Hello. Am I not audible? Hello.
You are audible, sir.
Okay, Anirudh, tell me, have you heard of any earthquake in India?
Yes, sir. I think in Andaman and Nicobar Islands.
Do you, Acha, Anirudh, tell me, do you think was there any earthquake in Madhya Pradesh in recent times? I mean, a big one.
I think I don't know
You
because
don't know.
MP is also is on Deccan Plateau, so
So,
I don't think there was an earthquake.
so there was a very big earthquake happening in 1997, Jabalpur earthquake. Hundreds of people died. Okay. So the epicenter was close to Jabalpur. So you are right. There is Deccan, but there is also, I mean, I don't know whether Deccan does anything to the earthquake, but there is something called Central Indian Tectonic Zone, which is a big fault system which runs parallel to the Narmada River, and that is an active fault system. So that fault often jerks, and you have earthquakes around the Central India. Of course, most of the earthquakes in India are restricted in the Himalayas. The Himalayas, almost every day there is an earthquake. You know, some earthquakes are really big, and then they come in the news, and you see terrible things associated with such earthquakes. But you know, Himalaya is every day there is an earthquake. There is another very famous earthquake area which is called Koena, which is in Western India. That is very much on the Deccan. And that has a very different story. Maybe we will talk about it one day. And this earthquake is called man-made earthquake. So they built a dam over Koena and Varna River. You can search about Koena in Google, and you can read about them more. You know, and because of the dam building, I mean, some sort of this, you know, imbalance that have been created in the Earth's crust. We can talk about it as well. There is one paper of mine and one of my PhD student you can find in ResearchGate on Koena earthquakes. It talks about how Koena essentially happens, you know, so different models associated with it. So, and it is called a man-made earthquake. Okay. But the most, and then of course there is Gujarat, which is Kutch, Bhuj 2001 earthquake. I don't know if you have heard about it. Latur earthquake, a very famous earthquakes killing hundreds and thousands of people. Okay. Bhuj earthquake happened in 2001, not very, I mean, almost just like 2 decades ago. And it completely destroyed the city and its surroundings. You know, thousands of people died. Okay. So, yeah, earthquake is a really devastating natural phenomena. And what people say that earthquakes do not kill people. What kills people are the tall buildings in which people live. You know. So we will discuss about these things later on. I mean, as we move on with earthquake seismology. So, as I was saying that earthquake often comes with a lot of myths around them. Okay. So here are some of the myths. People say when say for example in Hindu mythology, it is said that when one of the 8 elephants that carry the earth gets tired, okay, this was like in the ancient scriptures of Hindu mythology, it is written that earth is carried by elephants, and maybe one of them get tired and there is a tremor. In Mongolian mythology, people say when a frog that carries the world moves, you have an earthquake. In African mythology, when a giant on whose we all live, okay, sneezes or scratches, yeah, we have earthquake. Uh, when the attention of god Kashima, who looks after the giant catfish Namazu that supports the earth and prevents it to sink into the ocean, weakens, and Namazu moves. This is Japanese mythology, okay? And that is when you have an earthquake. You can see this picture of this beautiful catfish, okay? And this is the earth carried by the frog, okay? And when God Mimas decides to count the population in Peru, his footsteps shake the earth. Okay. Then natives and run out their hearts and yell, I am here, I am here. So it's like a God tricks to take people out of the house because of the tremor, and it is his job becomes easier to the senses. Okay. So now, as you know, that these are all myths and this has nothing to do with science. And we will soon see how earthquakes happen, what is the fundamentals of an earthquake, and how they are related to the elastic wave propagation. Okay. So, how does earthquake occur actually? Earthquakes occur at faults. Okay. We know about faults. So, how many type of faults are there? Can someone tell me from your basic knowledge on earth geology that you have studied, earth science that you have studied in your first, pre-major level? Tell me, what are the types of faults? Come on, someone has to volunteer. What are the type of faults? It's also written here: normal fault, reverse fault, and strike slip fault. Normal fault means hanging wall moves down with respect to the footwall. Reverse fault means, or thrust means, the hanging wall moves up with respect to the footwall. So this is the hanging wall, this is the footwall. Okay, so the hanging wall moving down with respect to the footwall is called normal fault. In case of a reverse fault, the hanging wall moves up with respect to the reverse fault. In case of strike slip fault, the blocks actually move, slide past each other. So when there is a faulting, that means there is the creation or rejuvenation of a plane of discontinuity. Okay, and because such movement happens, there is this elastic collision and the earthquake happens. So fault is a weak zone separating two geological blocks. Okay, so tectonic forces cause these blocks to move relative one to another. Okay, and one such movement actually happens, you do see the generation of an earthquake. Okay, that is in a very simplistic term of how a earthquake actually forms. Okay, now it has nothing to do with the movement of a frog or movement of movement
Elephant.
of elephant, yeah, and the catfish. Okay, I don't know about the hand of the god because that is a very controversial issue which I don't want to comment on. Okay, anyways, but as geologists, as earth scientists, we should vouch for the movement of the faults. Now you can see here. So earthquakes generally is associated with something called elastic rebound theory. What is elastic rebound theory? Is something like, say, for example, you have a spring, okay, and you keep that spring very tightly squeezed with your fingers, and once you leave that finger, okay, when you unstress that spring, what happens? Because of the elastic property of the spring, okay, it immediately comes back to its original position. It actually sprungs, right? It sprungs. And that sprunging is actually elastic rebound, you know. So once it gets back to its original position, it releases a lots of energy. And this is what we call elastic rebound theory. Okay. So when such faulting happens, you know, there is a rapid movement of the earth crust, and as a result, what we observed that energy is actually kind of translated as earthquake. Okay. Now you have to remember that 99% of fault movement. Okay, so there are fault movement happening right as we speak all over the world. In many places, faults are moving essentially. Okay, because the plates are moving. You know, because the plates are moving at a very slow rate, the faults are moving as well. Now, you know, if all those fault movement would have been translated into large earthquakes, you know, the world would have ceased to exist. So what is being found that almost 99% of fault movement is aseismic. That means that doesn't create any significant seismic energy. Okay, that doesn't really create big earthquakes. Only 1% of the total fault movement is actually translated in terms of big earthquakes. Okay, big or considerable amount of earthquakes. Okay, and that is done by this elastic rebound theory. Okay, elastic rebound process. Okay, now you can see here the fence offset of 1906 earthquake along the San Andreas Fault. You have already read about San Andreas Fault during your during the small assignment that you did. Okay, you can see here after the faulting event, this small fence has actually kind of moved away, okay, from here to here. Nobody puts a fence and leaves an area vacant like this. So you have to believe me that there was an earthquake and this whole crust of this side actually moved away, slipped away. Okay, and hence this, if you think that this fence can act as a marker, we see such movement. Okay, and this happened after the earthquake of 1906 along the San Andreas Fault. Okay, so this is kind of a pictorial representation of what happened. So the fence is like together, and you have this fault, and then because of the earthquake, you do see that there is a stress building up, of course. Okay, and then the fence is kind of being bent, and then once the stress is released, you do see the movement of the fault, and you know, this comes back to equilibrium, but as a result it has created earthquake. Okay, so suppose here is a fault. Okay, this is the surface of the earth, and at this point the disturbance is actually created. Okay, and this is what we call as the focus or the hypocenter of the earthquake. This is the actual position at which that elastic collision has happened. And from here, from this focus, the elastic wave is kind of being propagated in the form of wavefront, right? The wavefront that we have been talking about. Okay. Now, of course, there is another point that we have to remember, that is what we call as epicenter. Epicenter is, you know, if you project this focus or the hypocenter of the earthquake directly on the ground, okay, on the surface of the earth, the point of the projection is called epicenter. So hypocenter is the actual focus at depth where the earthquake has happened, and then if we kind of move that point above on the surface, that point will be called as epicenter. Okay, we will start talking about the elastic waves and you know, the surface waves then tomorrow. I will upload a lecture, okay, where we start talking, you know, we will deal with earthquake seismology in bit more details. Okay, and tomorrow also what I will do, I will send you your assignment for and you will have 1 week of time. So next Saturday you should submit the assignment, not this Saturday, but next Saturday, okay? So you will have 1 week, 9 days of time to submit your assignment. Okay.
So
Yeah. Tell me.
I think from the October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, some of the students are going to campus, returning to campus.
So you don't want me to give a assignment?
No, I think it will be, I mean, I don't know, we will talk with the DR once.
No, but I have to give the assignments, right? What can I do?
Okay, sir.
I mean, what is my option? You tell me. You don't want me to evaluate you?
No, not like that. I
So
think we can
what shall I do?
postpone.
There is a no. Then I have other things planned as well, right? So it can be then okay. Which is the date then your which is the date then your people are going back? Tell me.
Institute has called us on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. I mean,
First, second, and
Friday.
third. Okay, then you submit by 30th. It's fine, na? I'll give it tomorrow, and then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. Submit by 30th.
Okay, sir.
Okay. All right. I'll send you the assignment. Okay. You see, I am very accommodative, but we have to also, finish up the course with the actual rigor that it demands. Right. I cannot just keep on slipping stuff. Okay. That's not possible. I hope you understand. So we will finish your assignment by next Friday. So I'll send you the assignment tomorrow. All right then, and also I will upload the lecture. Thank you very much. I'll see you on next Wednesday then.